I can remember going downstairs in the morning. It was about 6:30. My partner came through and she said, "Have you heard the news?" And I'd forgotten all about it. And she said, "Oh, we're leaving the EU," and I was just completely stunned. I think, along with many other people, I hadn't expected that to be the case. I knew it was possible. I didn't think it was a foregone conclusion that we would stay in, but I thought it was more likely that we would. So very shocked. And I always remember when sort of growing up, particularly under the period of Margaret Thatcher and stuff, although she was pro-EU, I often felt there was a negative view of our European neighbours in this country, and I felt that went in. I think was it 1997 when Tony Blair became Prime Minister. I felt overnight, I felt that lift, and I really felt for the first time in my life at that point that we were European, and I think when I heard that result, it was just like, oh my God, we're not going to go back to this us and them mentality, are we? So yeah, so I was shocked, disappointed. I don't know what else I can say, really. Do I have a personal story about Brexit? Nothing, really sort of clear and concise. Just odd things. I mean, my family, I don't know what they voted, but I strongly think that they voted leave. They certainly don't show any concern about anything going on. And so that's a bit strange to have family members that you don't really discuss something with, which shouldn't, it doesn't feel like it should be that personal, really. It doesn't feel like it should be something that you can't talk about, but it has become that. I've got a very old friend of mine, and he's fiercely campaigns for Brexit. He's happy for no leave and everything. And again, it's difficult because he's still my friend, and I've told him that, through social media. I've reminded him that whatever happens, he's always my friend. That will not change. But the actual issue of Brexit we can't really talk about, and so I think when people talk about it being divisive and dividing the nation, it does even down into the sort of tiny, really into sort of personal relationships between down to two people. It can be a sort of just a no-go area. So I think that's where I feel most uncomfortable. And I suppose when in conversation, meeting people for the first time and things like that, parties or social gatherings, I suppose I'd be kind of gauging whether it would be okay to mention it. If I didn't get any inkling that how a person felt, then I probably wouldn't say anything about it, just because I wouldn't want to, it's a very emotional subject. It's very difficult to know whether you can actually have a kind of a conversation with any level of objectivity about it. People, it's very, very emotional. Did I think of taking another passport? Yes, of course. I mean, my daughter's now 21. Yeah, I mean, the day the news was out, she was, Dad, you've got to get an Irish passport, and I heard stories about the number of applications that Ireland was receiving, and all sorts of things. I know friends that have taken an Irish passport, and I do still think about it to this day, to be honest. And I think it's just, again, it's a kind of an emotional response, perhaps. I don't want to live somewhere if it becomes really divided to a point whereby even there could be violence and things like that. And, you know, obviously I do have the option of getting an Irish passport and moving to Ireland. I mean, I haven't been for a couple of years, but right from when my daughter was born, we went to Ireland every summer. My parents had a house over there, and we would go and visit them. So we're very, very familiar with Ireland. So it wouldn't be a huge leap of faith to go and live in Ireland. So it is a possibility. It is something I have thought about. I'd rather not have to even think about it, to be honest. I would rather only ever do anything for positive reasons. I wouldn't like to think I was making a decision based on negative feelings. So I really hope it never ever comes to that. But yeah, I mean, my daughter still keeps mentioning it, to be honest. She's obviously a lot younger than me and got hopefully a lot more of her life left in front of her. So I think she's more concerned about what the future holds. So has this result taught me anything about the UK? I suppose I've got to say yes, it has. I've always been a believer that if something can happen anywhere, it can happen everywhere. So if you have, let's say for example, if you have a political right wing take control of a country anywhere in the world, I've always thought that it was kind of a bit arrogant to think, oh yes, well it happens there, but it couldn't happen here, of course. Because these things are not about the location, they're about people and the circumstances. That's my opinion anyway. And so there are always opportunists, there are always people out there seeking to make their mark, to do what they want to do, and they're looking for an opportunity. And so even although I would have said that 10, 20, 30 years ago, even though I've always felt that way, it still is a shock to feel that it is actually happening. So I think what I've learned is that it's more difficult to recognise complacency than perhaps I thought. And for me, I think that there's been a complacency with some people, and for a large number of people, there's been a feeling of being I can't say necessarily disempowered, because maybe they didn't feel they had any power in the first time, say disenfranchised. I think a lot of people feeling that they really don't have any control, and a lot of people feeling quite complacent, thinking, oh, things are okay here, I'm doing fine, I do have a say. And somehow, you know, there's been an opportunity to exploit that. And I just think it's awful. I think that you know, it's just very unhappy, the whole situation, and I can't see. I just hope that I've got another lesson to learn, and I'm completely wrong, and that you know, human beings that were forever resourceful. You know, we go through terrible things in history, throughout history. We overcome them for periods and fall back into them. So it just doesn't feel nice to feel that I'm living at the edge of something quite dark, really. So do I think the image of England will suffer on the world stage? Yes, I do. Not indefinitely, and not for everybody, but I think some people will see England as much more fallible than perhaps they'd seen it, much less secure. I think some people will laugh at England and see the English as not quite as cool, calm and collected and sensible as they previously thought. I think some people will see it as an opportunity to exploit that. I think that businesses, you know, that come to make deals, you know, if people see England as some way isolated, and if it taints the relationship with the other European countries, which I think it will, then I think other countries will see England as more vulnerable. So they will seek to do deals which benefit themselves. They're not going to come in like a knight on a stallion coming in to sort of save England from anything. They're going to come in to see what they can pick up and get. So yes, I do think it will damage people's view of England and the standing of England in the world. I think at the end of it all, these things come down to money, and if England, you know, maintains its level of economic power, or certainly if it were to increase it, then it would very quickly sort of come back. You know, and people say, well, it was a smart move, look at them now, kind of thing. So obviously it's the future, so my guess is as good as anybody's. But I do think in the short term, as a gambling man, I'd have my £5 or £10 on the fact that it would, the view of England would diminish in the short term at least. One word about the whole situation. How do I feel? Worried. I'm not, you know, up on all these things. I'm not well read about, you know, how Parliament works. So the information that I have about it is really, you know, what I've had from the media over the last few weeks. And so what I've got from the media, it seems to be that what's going on is not democratic, or it's not. It's at least bending the rules, shall we say, and it feels that way as well. It just doesn't feel right, really, for, you know, somebody that's become Prime Minister that hasn't got there through an election, who, you know, is quoted as the things that he said about Gordon Brown. He accused, when he became Prime Minister, it wasn't democratic. You know, just the clear hypocrisy of the man. You know, I just, how could anybody trust him, really? You know, so if he's doing something, and he's doing something extreme, that does concern me, and you know, and the whole idea of removing people's voice just doesn't sound right to me. You know, I don't know. I never dreamed of being in a position whereby the Prime Minister of this country was stopping Parliament from functioning, seemingly in order to get their own way, basically, to do what they want to do. I mean, that you know, democracy is not about an individual doing what they want to do. It's about, you know, consensus, and you know, there will always be some people unhappy in a democracy, you know, but for somebody to their own force of will to just be determined to do what they want. I'm not suggesting he's without supporters, but I don't think that that's the issue here, because I don't think he's thinking about anybody but himself and the maintenance of power. Okay, the Irish border, the backstop, the peace, the Good Friday Agreement. Um, I've got a cousin who's in politics in Ireland, so I need to have a conversation with him, really. He's in the south, in Dublin. I'm not sure of what will lead to what. You know, people talk about, you know, we can't have a hard border, it will be the return to the Troubles and stuff. You know, I'm old enough to have lived through the Troubles. I remember, I think it was 1976, in Birmingham, where I live, two pubs were bombed, and I remember, to this day, I can remember coming home from the pub with my friend, and we stood and we talked on the road into the early hours. We must have stood talking for 2-3 hours, just in absolute shock and fear for our parents. Both sets of parents had absolutely broad Irish accents. His were from the north, mine were from the south. And I remember my mother in particular saying that she was ashamed to speak in shops because people would hear her accent, and you know, and that's just what we experienced here. You know, God knows what it was like for the people actually of the north, where most of the killing and violence was going on. So I would hate anything to lead to a return to that.